Yeah, so throughout time, there's always been, or especially in the 20th century, well, 19th, 20th, and 21st, people have talked about a new world order. I mean, this is common. And every time you hear it, you think it's the newest world order, a new thing, but it's not. So anyway, we have this, people refer to this rules-based world order all the time. And depending on where you sit, you want different rules, or you're going to play along with certain rules. And depending where you sit means, are you a corporate executive? Are you a chairman of the board? Are you an investment banker? Are you a billionaire, an oligarch, a real capitalist, somebody who manipulates capital, creates codes, capital instruments, derivatives, and so on to make more money, capital on capital returns, and get super, super filthy rich. And then, of course, at the end of the day, you say, I'm going to give most of my fortune away, which only means that you're going to control how your money is spent through your foundations. Because when you have so much money, the only thing you need after that is more control. So you're still going to be a huge influencer through your foundations. Don't tell me it's hands off, that you just give it to somebody. I mean, if Bezos wants to just give me half of his fortune, I'll manage it for him. I'll see that it gets into the right hands. I'll be an effective, immaculate, ethical dude that takes care of the world. But he's not going to do that. He's Bill and Melinda Gates foundations, all these foundations, the money goes where they want it to go. So don't be fooled by that. So rules-based, yeah, they make up the rules. It benefits them, not us. And then they get more control at the end of the day. And they get control over how capital's coded, and also what to do with their money once they have it. And when they've given it all away, how much are they making in their sleep? How much do they make when they sleep, let's say 6 hours, because they're busy people, 6 hours at night? Way more money than the vast majority of people could ever hope of earning in a lifetime. So, it's like amazing. So this one article, Putin's War and the Mirage of the Rules-Based Order, there's a lot of things out like that these days, and I posted a bunch of them on Globe Hacker's Facebook page for people to look at. The way to use that page is not to think that you have to read everything or even be attracted to everything as you scroll down. Just look at things and clusters of articles that might be interesting to you, and then choose the ones you want to look into. It's just a big dump of current events. And I know you hate my guts, because any asshole who's going to share their opinion openly and dare to, comment on stuff is an arrogant piece of garbage who thinks they know everything. So if I recommend a book, you're going to say, oh yeah, you think I don't know anything because I don't read books. No, I'm just recommending a book. And if you want to read it, read it. It might be interesting, might help you understand how the world works some way. That's what I hope anyway. So yeah, this article is interesting. And, I use my Evernotes. There's all these different applications for trying to help you think better and be more organized and all that stuff. I don't know which one works better. You learn an application and then you got to learn a different one because it hyperlinks in a different way or whatever. It's supposed to make you smart. All of this takes time. Note-taking takes time. Reading takes time. Digesting the information takes time. Making a video takes time. So I get it. Most people just don't have the time to devote to all this crazy stuff. So anyway, he starts with this interesting quote by Thucydides, Greek historian, way back in the day, the classical period. And it's pretty apropos, makes total sense. They're not that much different from us, are they? Those people way back when. So, quote, he says, the strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must. Isn't that true? Or doesn't it seem so? It doesn't matter, if things are relatively better now than they were back then, but that sure as heck seems real. So it's, I don't necessarily go along with everything in any of these articles. It's just fuel for thought, and some of it's salient or very topical, which is why I share it. So yeah, if you're gonna try to destroy Russia or isolate it economically, it has ripple effects around the world. And these externalities or third order effects, or whatever you want to call them, they matter. And you can't predict how these things are going to sort themselves out over time. You can look at broad trends, over time through a historical lens or macroeconomic lens, and you can try to figure out and predict and forecast, but you don't know. So, and it's not just, looking at the article, it's not just Russia that will become isolated. The Ukraine war could trigger the unraveling of decades of broader global economic engagement, long viewed as a key deterrent against great power conflicts. Well, yeah, but also we depend on all these relationships for all our stuff. Unless you live in your little Curtis Yarvin kingdom in southwest Texas, where everything's done right by the, aristocracy and however it's organized, however you found your king, and you all believe something important, you have the right metaphysics and whatnot, you're depending on global trade. You're depending on products that were made abroad, and so on and so forth. And you're dependent on the ecosystem, the air and the water quality and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, you can be an individual, that's all great, but you're still part of a society, a culture. I mean, you've got to understand that. And most of the great stuff that's invented and created in the world is a collaborative effort. It's never, except maybe when God created the universe, it's never just one thing doing it, right? You stand on the shoulder of giants and you collaborate with all kinds of brilliant people and you come up with an interesting and great result. So isn't that the truth? I think it is. So as we go down in the article, at a time when economic power has shifted eastward, but the West still controls the world's financial architecture, the capitalist coding capital, including the main international payments systems, the primary currencies for trade and financial flows, and the leading credit ratings agencies, the establishment of parallel arrangements seems imminent. What that just basically means is after a while, when people get tired of playing by your rules and your code, you get together with a bunch of people, maybe you've been pushed together by idiotic politicians and oligarchs and players who don't really understand what's going on in the world. And they decide they're going to create their own thing. And suddenly your thing isn't that important anymore. And of course, there are these traps, Does that mean world war has to happen to maintain your empire or whatever? It happens sometimes, It's happened before. And then it's funny, after World War II, and for a long time, Russia and Germany, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, were doing okay trading together. So international law may be powerful against the powerless, but it is powerless against the powerful. And that's because the powerful code capital. I gotta stop. Okay, I had to answer the doorbell. I'm back. I shall continue. Yeah, so, really, who makes the code? It's not like you vote on everything the Supreme Court does or any court in your city or jurisdiction does. Who has the money and the power and the influence and the connections to influence the way laws are written? I don't know. So the world is headed for an era of greater upheaval? Well, maybe. Steven Pinker would say, greater upheaval compared to what? At some point in the past, it was more upheaved. But who knows, right? I have a friend here who was telling me that when she was a kid, everybody worked and hardly anyone owned shoes. And, life was tough. So that's in Portugal, not so long ago in the 20th century. And if you could afford shoes, you had one pair for a long time. Anyway, however it plays out, the pretense of a shared commitment to international law will be the first casualty. Now, that would not be good. But we don't play by the rules. America doesn't play by the rules. It breaks the rules. It's powerful enough to do that. So it says it's going to do one thing and it doesn't. If it invades a country, it's okay, it's legal. If somebody else invades a country, it's the worst thing that ever happened in the history of the human race. And it's always been like that. Since before the revolution, might makes right. So I don't know why we get so freaking self-righteous. It's ridiculous. And people don't want to work at cooperation and understanding and, a real rules-based international order. I don't know why they wouldn't want to do that, but they don't. It's more fun to think that your way is the best way and everybody else gets along with it, or else you kill them. We go to war. Well, okay. Let's see how that goes when we have all the kinds of weapons that we have now. And you don't need a bunch of oligarchs from Davos to screw things up. They create the game and they manage the game and they play the game. You don't. It's not a conspiracy. It's the way things are. If you want to change it, you'll have to figure out how to change it. If you want to go back to some beautiful traditional past, you'll have to figure out how to get there. And what you need, what you depend on, is it you're going to build your houses with wood, and you're going to use oxen to plow the field, or you're going to need petrochemicals for everything. So the next article is Fighting a War on the Wrong Planet from Tom Dispatch, Rajan Menon. So what climate change should have taught us? Well, it's not teaching us anything except that we don't like it, because we've had a lot since the Industrial Revolution, and we have a lot of stuff. We don't want to give up any of it, and so we want to have our cake and eat it too. And at the end of the day, there's not going to be any cake left, and then we're going to have to make do with what's left over. So petrochemicals aren't going to be around forever. Oil and tar and all the different kinds of heavy crude and light crude. It's a limited resource. So, if we want to figure out how to store electricity with batteries in a better way, or we want to figure out alternative energy systems, we can do that. But if we develop fusion energy and just have a paperclip maximizing machine anyway, what good is it going to do us? Everything here is interdependent and has a shelf life. So there's only, most of it's limited resources. And it's interdependent. So, without certain microbes in the soil, you're going to have trouble. Yeah, so that's just a fact of the matter. Fisheries, conservation, it all matters. Soil biology matters. We don't know about it because we buy processed food at the store. Maybe you're a shareholder. Right, so anyway, nobody cares about climate change. It annoys people. Climate crisis, not yet. We need lots of people starving to death before it's a crisis. So it's a combination of water issues, severe weather issues, changing climates in various regions affecting farming and everything like that, food production, soil erosion, pollution, forever chemicals, toxic chemicals, all the externalities of our lifestyle just building up over time and then making it very hard for us to survive. And then when people start starving to death, of course, that happens to other people, not to me and mine. It happens to those people over there. I put a little poem on Facebook about that. Doesn't happen to us, happens to them. So Washington's vaunted rules-based international order has undergone a stress test following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and here's the news so far. It hasn't held up well. In fact, the disparate reactions to Vladimir Putin's war have only highlighted stark global divisions, which reflect the unequal distribution of wealth and power. Such divisions have made it even harder for a multitude of sovereign states to find the minimal common ground needed to tackle the biggest global problems, especially climate change. Of course, for you, it's probably not a problem, so who cares? Ignore it until it's on your doorstep. But inequality is a problem, and there's a lot of problems, but not that many things are good. I still go to the NFL game. I still watch my UFC on the weekends. I still drink wine once a week. Oh, everything's perfect. Candide. Again, Candide. So, going on, China's average monthly trade with Russia has surged by nearly 2/3. Turkey's has nearly doubled, and India's has risen more than threefold, while Russian exports to Brazil have nearly doubled as well. And don't think Lula's going to change that. He's going to do business as he must, especially if he's going to try to save some or conserve some of the rainforest. Got to have stuff to do your stuff, to do your business. So there it is. For his part, Lula claimed Joe Biden and Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky were partly to blame for the war. And this isn't that heterodox. A lot of people have that point of view, but I think those people are just a little bit more savvy about how the world works, geopolitics, and the great game than most. It's a lot easier not to see two sides. And then moving on, besides giving their immediate daily struggles with energy prices, debt, food security, poverty, and climate change, a war in Europe seemed a distant affair, a distinctly secondary concern. Brazilian President Bolsonaro typically suggested that he wasn't about to join the sanctions regime because his country's agriculture depended on imported Russian fertilizer. Guns, germs, and steel. How about concrete, steel, fertilizer, petrochemicals? These things, we can't live without it. And then we have this other bottleneck, which is chip foundries in Taiwan. How stupid are we all, whether we're Chinese, Indian, or American or European, that we just decided it was a good idea, the global supply chain, to have all the important chip foundries in one country, in one little postage stamp place in one country. I mean, isn't that nonsense? So China doesn't want to destroy that because it'll wreck China. America doesn't want to destroy it because it'll wreck America and the rest of the global economy. So basically it's posturing. Don't invade Taiwan. We'll stop you if you invade Taiwan. And it's all just a bunch of nonsense. Is anyone really going to fight over Taiwan? I mean, come on. But it keeps the game going. It keeps the military-industrial complex chugging along, keeps the business happening. Because, we got to arm everybody. We got to be prepared. We got to get ready. And maybe it does blow up into a war. If it does, it's catastrophic. Just forget about it. It takes decades and billions of dollars of investment to get these chip foundries co-located around the world. A cloud, an international cloud of chip foundries. And then all of these things that we engineer, whether it's a diesel car or a computer chip, have to be compatible with products that are being made and sold in the marketplace. So, everybody can't have their own chips for their own special computers. Maybe the kingdom in Arkansas doesn't have that kind of stuff. They have to trade for it, So what's Portugal going to do? We'll give you some olives and some wine for some computers and chips. Or are we going to learn how to build computers and microchips in here, 10 million person population, and somehow everyone's going to come back to this country to work for a much lower salary to build stuff that they could get paid lots and lots of money for in another country. Well, it's business anyway, so Taiwan's doing good business. And we're not making chips. Potato chips, yes, we can always do that. So, continuing, Europe has to grow out of the mindset that its problems are the world's problem, but the world's problems are not Europe's problem. So this is, people from India talking to Europe. And that's another thing, people just don't want to kowtow to Europe and the United States forever. It's like, we don't want to do that. We have our own issues. I know you're going to fight this war in Ukraine, but we have problems on our borders, in our region. And most of these geopolitical problems you started, the colonialists started. They drew the borders. They separated the tribes. They created the nation states. They did it for commercial reasons. And now we're stuck with it and we have problems, but it's not your problem. It's way over there. If the Somalis die or the Ethiopians die or there's a problem in Congo or somewhere, it doesn't really matter. India and Pakistan. You create this mess, you walk away, you leave it with us. It's not your problem. Okay. They're going to find a solution eventually. The other thing is, I keep talking about, the World Food Program warned that 47 million additional people, more than Ukraine's total population, were going to face acute food insecurity. And this is what happens when the rules-based system breaks down, and when we don't understand how interdependent we are and how important global cooperation is to people. People start dying. So when you start starving your people, then you're going to stand up and take notice. But will you have any clue why? Maybe it's an act of God, the famine. Maybe it was preventable if people took responsibility. But no. It's the demons. It's Satan. It's an act of God. This is why we're going to die of starvation. You know, back in the old days, you didn't know. Your information was so limited, and the resolution of information was limited. So when a flood came, you didn't know why it happened. You're just like, oops, that was bad. It must have been evil spirits. But we know now where the hurricane came from and where the energy in the atmosphere develops and is stored and released in storms and whatnot. The other thing, you know, these ideologues like the Colonel, they're talking about, all we need is a few, you know, volcanoes to explode. We'll have global cooling. So what's all the mess about this climate change thing? It's like snowballs in Congress. It's ridiculously stupid. But anyway, they're smart in certain ways and blind in others. So universal human rights, of course, occupy a prominent place in Washington's narratives about the rules-based world order it so regularly promotes, but in practice frequently ignores, notably in this century in the Middle East. Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine was aimed at regime change against a country that posed no direct threat to Russia and therefore was indeed a violation of the UN Charter. But so too was the 2003 American invasion of Iraq, something few in the global South have forgotten. So depending on your perspective. Also, it's an illegal war, technically, but did Vladimir Putin have any reasons for starting it? Were there stages, predictable stages that we could have forecasted would lead to an invasion? Have people been talking about that for decades? Did we not know in 2010 or 2014 or 2015, 16, 17, 18 what was going on? Had there not been diplomatic signals sent to the world? Were they not articulated? Were they not written down in documents and distributed around? And did we not read them? So it's all so unpredictable. Everybody in February is saying, oh, it's never going to happen, just like nuclear war is never going to happen. He's not going to invade Ukraine. Why would he do that? But of course he did. And that could have been forecasted, and it was by a lot of people. And I posted all kinds of stuff on Facebook, Globe Hackers, about forecasters who saw this coming, commentators and other people, economists and global strategists and consultants and whoever, experts from various domains. You could see it coming a mile away, just like you can see mass starvation coming a mile away, but you're not going to do anything about it. And then when you do something about it, it's going to be this self-righteous thing that somebody else caused it all, and now we have to fix it by killing them. So then it gets to the war and climate change thing. So as a start, the 100 billion per year that richer countries pledged to poor ones in 2009, and now we're at COP27, right? To help move them away from hydrocarbon based energy hasn't been met in any year so far. And recent disbursements, minimal as they have been, were largely in the form of loans, not grants. And remember, most of these capital scams are derivatives based on various kinds of debt instruments. So credit default swaps and whatever, these types of things. But there are many, many, many. And you don't play in that world unless you're a big shareholder and own a lot of bonds and know how to pick them. You're not even that doesn't even touch you except when you go to the grocery store. So anyway, not grants. We can't allocate 3% of global GDP to solve a problem We just can't afford it. But we can build as many arms as possible. We can really upgrade our nuclear armaments. Not a problem. And we could fly to Mars if there was oil on Mars. Elon Musk would say, well, it's really not that hard. Yeah, just we launch a rocket every second for the next 12 years, and we'd bring the payloads back by slingshotting them around the black hole behind the sun. And buy shares now. So the resources the West will now have to spend just to cover Ukraine's non-military needs for 2023, $55 billion, I guess that's an estimate, in budgetary assistance and infrastructure repairs alone. And do you think Russia's done destroying Ukrainian infrastructure after the winter? So according to President Zelensky, well, I'm gonna need $55 billion to fix the stuff, and then once it's blown up again, I'll need another $55 billion. Plus soaring inflation and slower growth in Western economies thanks to the war make it doubtful that green communities, make it doubtful that green commitments to poor countries will be fulfilled in the years to come. They will never be fulfilled, people. Never. There are no green commitments. If some clever people figure out a way to make lots of money for the players on whatever quote-unquote green thing they come up with, something will happen. Until that day, nothing's going to happen. And we're going to get hotter and hotter, faster and faster. All the predictions that good scientists have made have happened faster. So there's a huge iceberg that just left Antarctica, and it's going to have a gigantic impact on everything, and nobody cares. It doesn't matter. And the North and the South is heating up fast. So never mind the pledge. In advance of November 2021 COP26, United Nations Climate Change Conference, that the $100 billion goal would be met in 2023. That's not going to happen. And you can see at the COP thing now, it's ridiculous. The pledges mean nothing. It's just a way to signal some kind of righteousness and some kind of, thing to people that you're trying. But the minute they go to the next conference, which is about oil exploration and development, they're going to be all in for that one too. And then they're going to go to the next one, which is military, budgets and commitments, and they're going to be all for that too. They're going to be all for everything that makes a buck. And if they have to keep the Gretas at bay, because God knows she could just come in at any time with her magical witch powers and just destroy the Davos crowd and all the oligarchs and the bankers and the hedge fund managers and all those crazy billionaires. She could wipe them out. So they have to placate her because Greta is scary. And most, righteous Christian Americans understand that Greta's like demon-possessed or being used by pedophiles to peddle some conspiracy about climate change. Now look, that was a joke, okay? So don't censor the video because I made some snarky remark. Look at the whole context of what I'm sharing here. And big deal about me, everybody else. I'm just commenting on what other people are sharing. So according to the International Energy Agency, if the Paris Agreement's target for limiting global warming and its goal of net zero, which is silly, in global emissions by 2050, why by 2050? Why not 2062 and 6 months or 2038 and 9 months? Are to prove feasible, the building of additional fossil fuel infrastructure must cease immediately. It's never going to cease because we need fossil fuels in a long-term transition to quote-unquote green energy. And we need petrochemicals to do all kinds of things. So, and even, like I said, even if we had fusion right now, we'd probably just be pedal to the metal for the paperclip maximizing machine. Just like, make more stuff. We have unlimited energy now, you know. Oh, and the only way to stop that would be put on the goggles and go into the metaverse. Live in a capsule motel that you rent and stay in the metaverse. That way you don't clog up anything. You don't have to buy anything real. So you can see why people come up with conspiracy theories about that kind of stuff. So UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres characterized the dash towards yet more hydrocarbon energy use as madness. Using a phrase long reserved for nuclear war, he suggested that such an unceasing addiction to fossil fuels could end in mutually assured destruction. Well, it will, because it's going to lead to mass starvation. But those other people are going to starve to death, not you and your people, so don't worry about it. It's going to be okay. But, you know, how long does it take? By then I'll be dead. And what is it? Your daughter or your granddaughter is going to starve to death? Oh, not them, of course. It's those other people. So will Ukraine's post-war reconstruction, which his prime minister has estimated last month will cost close to $750 billion, probably $1 trillion by the time it really happens. And that may be an underestimate considering the Russian army has taken its wrecking ball, or perhaps wrecking drones, missiles, and artillery to everything from power plants and waterworks to schools, hospitals, and apartment buildings. Again, concrete, steel, oil and gas, petrochemicals, fertilizers. That's what our whole world is built on. And believe me, I mean, you're going to reconstruct this thing? Civilization is a heat engine. That $1 trillion, you can just make it up. Banks can just print it, quote unquote. Modern monetary theory. And then you have to go and get the concrete, the steel, and the oil, and gas, the petrochemicals, the fertilizers, and all that stuff, all the materials to rebuild it. And that's just heat. So, we're not global cooling. And no, those volcanoes aren't going to help. But of course, the volcanoes, when they blow up, they kill those people. They don't kill me and mine. They kill them. And then once they're killed by the volcanic explosion, then the world cools off. And then we're all happy. See, that's what the Colonel would say. Because he knows so much about climate science. He doesn't. But he doesn't want to admit ignorance in a particular domain because he's so smart in other domains. So if such appeals are to be more than verbiage, however, compelling evidence is needed that 195 countries share basic principles of some sort on climate change, that the world is more than the sum of its parts. Well, I'm a dreamer, but I can't imagine that ever happening. There are so many people that want to blow up any kind of cooperation like that. They hate the idea of global cooperation because they think Western civilization is so much better than everything else in the world that doesn't support quote unquote Western civilization, that to share anything with that part of the world would be tantamount to some kind of satanic evil. They hate the idea. It's just like healthcare for immigrants? No, so let's just all die of diabetes because I'm not gonna give anything to those people coming across the border. Well, the Colonel wants to bring back all the troops and put them on the southern border. And God knows if you do that, America's just gonna be perfect. Everyone's going to be so happy. Everyone's going to be golfing once a week, and they're going to be so happy. But that's not true.
It's like warfare, a siege, a kind of like attempted deconstructing of our country, our civilization. I mean, we see these patterns. We're not supposed to recognize patterns. You're bad if you do that. But is it possible that this is an intentional deconstructing of the U.S., of our economy, of our morale to break us down?
Well, it's hard to resist that conclusion. I mean, if anybody reads your work about Hollywood and looks at the manipulation of symbols,
right,
and their meanings, people are confused now. People have lost their sense of themselves. There's this line from the movie Braveheart, where the man who played Robert the Bruce tries to tell Mel Gibson, who's playing Sir William Wallace, and I like Mel, but he was the wrong guy to play Sir William Wallace, who was 6'7", and a human killing machine. He probably would have been better off with somebody like Dolph Lundgren. But at any rate, he says, you don't understand something, Wallace. This country has no sense of itself from top to bottom. I think that's where we are. And I think it's obviously deliberate. You see it sort of transmitted through film,
right,
through radio, through television, through the internet, breaking down this notion that you as an individual are anything. And it's back to where we started with the Soviet man. It's a sort of more recent version of the same thing. It won't work. I think it's going to be arrested, but it will be because of the economic, financial decline, combined with what will ultimately be a governmental implosion. It'll be Sri Lanka-like. I've used that sometimes in my op-eds. Oh, come on, Doug. We could never be Sri Lanka. Right. Watch. And what happened in Sri Lanka when everything collapsed? The government got into its limousines and drove away.
Yeah.
People that all want power, and that's what all...
There's still going to be libtards. You're still going to have to own the libs and whatnot. There's going to be Trump. He's going to have to go. Russia Gates. So anyway, those are those things. And then getting into the videos, the Jay Dyer thing, you really should see what the Colonel has to say, because he's very interesting, and some of his ideas about what's going on in Ukraine, in my opinion, are bang on, just right. Colonel Douglas Macgregor, and he has a lot of other things, but then slips into the conspiracy thing really easily. So, and that's just because none of us know everything. And we should be more humble and admit that. But we're so smart, we can't admit what we don't know, Scott Ritter, I think he's a bit more middle of the road, a little bit more humble. But he has strong opinions about this stuff as well. And this is coming from the Real News Network, which is a more liberal angle, but he talks to conservatives as well, and his perspective is very interesting and good as well. He talks a lot about the nuclear arms that we have, and how after all these treaties start, and all these missile treaties and so on that we had developed, it took us a long time to get there. We've dismantled them all. We're talking hypersonic missiles now. We're talking about launching a missile and having a target blown up in 4 minutes. So how do you defend against that? We're putting missile defense systems in Poland, breaking all the rules. And it just makes, it makes one wonder if the players think that they can win a nuclear war, which is absurd. That's total madness. And he knows a lot about that, so it's interesting to get his perspective on that, and maybe it makes you curious about that kind of stuff. And maybe you'll want to hold your leaders to account.
This is an extraordinarily dangerous situation that we're in right now. There's a lot of talk about nuclear weapons. Why? Russia respects Article 5 of the NATO treaty, which is an attack against one is an attack against all. Russia is fully cognizant of the fact that if it attacks Poland or the Baltic states, it's at war with NATO. And they know what that means. But NATO doesn't respect anything about Russia. NATO knows no limits. NATO has been expanding nonstop. They lied about it, about not wanting to do it back in 1990 to Gorbachev. They've lied about it ever since. They've been expanding. But one of the whole reasons we're at war in Ukraine right now is because of NATO wanting to expand and bring Ukraine into its umbrella. So when Russia moved into Ukraine, it also had to mollify Belarus, which is very nervous, saying, well, okay, while you guys are down here doing that Ukraine thing, what's to protect us? What if NATO decides to come into us? So Russia put a marker down and said, if NATO decides to get involved in this, intervene, we will use all the means at our disposal.
And then I want you to listen to the Great Simplification podcast with Arthur Berman. I followed him for a while, and I became aware of Nate, I think it was last year. He's a great guy. He was a teacher, a lovely man. And you'll understand that, if you don't want to read a whole bunch of Vaclav Smil books, because he's written a lot on energy. If you don't want to read Vaclav, you can just listen to this short 1-hour podcast with Arthur Berman, who's a petroleum geologist. And you'll understand a little bit more about the oil thing. It's a big deal. All right, so enjoy those videos. I hope you'll share them and read a Vaclav Smil book, please. Very interesting stuff. Go to Globe Hackers on Facebook, Facebook/Globe Hackers. For current events, a lot of posts there from all different angles, and you can scroll through and see if there's anything interesting. Yeah. Aggregating the news, big deal. Everybody does it. I understand that. I have my own ideas about why the information is important, and you can take it or leave it. So please click like, subscribe, support this channel, because I'd like to level it up over time, but I'm going to need some extra resources to be able to do that. People, help, not so much things. I have time, a bit of investment, but to do a good job, you need to spend a lot of time writing, editing. I'd like to get more original footage, video footage, because I used to be in that business, so I can do that if I have time and help. I want to create a studio in one of the buildings on my property and have live interviews and so on. We'll see if that ever happens. Anyway, it'd be nice to have your support. If you can click like, if you can comment, that would be really appreciated. If it's a sincere, comment, I'd love to have it. So there you go. I've asked you. So hope you come back again. Take good care. William T. Out.